If you're like me, watching just a few seconds of Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings can transport you back to Middle-earth and bring a smile to your face. There's a part of you that just sinks into these movies like they're an old, familiar recliner waiting by the fireplace.
I spent all my childhood pretending I was off somewhere else.
I've watched this trilogy well over a dozen times, and from conversations with friends and people online, it's not particularly unusual among Tolkien fans. But having been out for over 20 years now, you would think that these movies would start to show their age, or that our tastes would change, or we'd at least get tired of them. And yet, none of these things have happened. Quite the opposite, really. We still fall into the peaceful bliss of the Shire during Bilbo's party preparations. We still know the dread of the ringwraiths slinking through Bree in search of the hobbits. We still feel a swell of pride when Gandalf makes his stand at the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and we still mourn with Aragorn when Boromir is beyond saving. For some of us, it's a long-standing tradition to gather with loved ones during the holidays for an annual rewatch. For others, Middle-earth is a place of great comfort during times of illness or in the midst of loss. We are, some of us, sons and daughters who bonded with our fathers and mothers in Rivendell, Moria, and Lothlorien. All of these have been true for me at different times in my life. Recently, a bunch of my friends came over after my ACL surgery when I was in a fair bit of pain, and we watched the movies all the way through. It was the perfect escape. Whether you read the books first and then got to see them come to life in theaters, or the movies introduced you to the world of Tolkien, we can all agree on one thing. This epic saga runs deep. The world, the characters, the story, the filmmaking, and the themes, they stir emotions within us like no other movies. We are connected to these stories. Filmmakers have been trying for 20 years to reproduce this lightning in a bottle, and nothing has even come close. I want to examine what sets these movies above all others. What brings us back year after year? Why do we care so much about Frodo's perilous journey, about Isildur's heir reclaiming the throne, about a friendship between an elf and a dwarf, about the loyalty of three hobbits to their friend, or about the fate of Middle-earth? It all starts with The Fellowship of the Ring, the movie that brought the world to life and introduced us to the characters and the story. Coming out in 2001, it established the tone, the style, and many of the themes of the trilogy. To make sure things were fresh on my mind, I rewatched the movie, reread the book, watched a bunch of behind the scenes, researched online, and sifted through the special features to better understand my love for the movie and to better understand what makes The Fellowship of the Ring one of the best movies ever. A prerequisite for any good fantasy story is a believable, well thought out world with rules, lore, characters, magic, and history. The scene of Sam carrying Frodo up the slopes of Mordor would be meaningless without understanding why Sam can't just take the ring himself. We couldn't feel the importance of Boromir's last words to Aragorn without understanding their relationship or the state of Gondor's leadership.
My captain. My king.
The way this information is conveyed to viewers is through exposition. Many people who watched The Lord of the Rings go into the movies with very little knowledge of Middle-earth. Luckily, The Fellowship of the Ring handles exposition rather gracefully in a few ways. The first way is a masterful prologue. This is some of the finest writing and editing in fantasy movie history. The prologue establishes the entire history of the ring, presents the relevant lore that fuels the films, and most importantly, provides 7 minutes of blissful entertainment. Cate Blanchett gives us the haunting narration of someone who's watched these events unfold and witnessed the resulting calamity.
9 rings were gifted to the race of men,
The warning in her voice is so tangible.
who above all else desire power.
The somber tone of this strongly written prologue gives the action sequences, like the battle against Sauron, weight. It's not just a fight scene to get the audiences excited. It taps into our deep desire for good to overcome evil. The fate of all Middle-earth lies in the balance, and the moment Sauron enters the battle, our hearts sink. When Sauron is defeated, we sense the urgency to destroy the ring and know Galadriel's dismay when Isildur does not.
But the hearts of men are easily corrupted.
By the end of it, we understand this world and its epic scale, and more importantly, we care about what happens to it. The sequence is thorough and yet concise. It's a work of art. I should acknowledge that this exposition isn't lore perfect, but I don't want to spend too much time on the subject, so I'll use a quote that I really like from a discussion on Reddit. We can't blame the narrative intro for errors and inconsistencies. We'd have to blame the director's vision for the movie and the medium of film itself for that. Within the parameters set up for the trilogy as it stands, the intro is one of the most skillful and effective parts of the entire series. I have to agree, the movies had to change things to even be movies at all. Another method of exposition is dialogue. The best world building is the kind that goes unnoticed and doubles as character development. The Fellowship of the Ring is full of this. Take the scene where Gandalf returns from his research to talk to Frodo. One of the ways we learn of the ring's corrupting power is from Gandalf's intense reaction when Frodo offers him the ring.
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
We hear about Gandalf's desire to protect the weak and innocent, and we're made to realize that if the most powerful character we've met thus far can't withstand the temptation of this ring, then the ring really must be powerful. We see this time and again throughout the films. We learn about the shards of Narsil and more about Aragorn's lineage in the context of Boromir and Aragorn's rivalry. Within that same scene, we come to understand Aragorn's desire, no, his need to correct his ancestors' mistakes while establishing his relationship with Arwen. Yet another example is when we hear of the Balrog's origins through Saruman's taunts.
You fear to go into those mines.
We don't even notice the little bits of information that have been slipped in.
The dwarves delved too greedily and too deep.
I really appreciate Jackson and the other writers' reverence for Tolkien's dialogue. There are so many lines in the movie that come verbatim from the book.
The language is that of Mordor, which I will not utter here.
He does trim things down to save runtime, but you can tell he wants to leave as much as he can untouched. Even the changes he does make are to maintain pace and to keep the story more ring-centric, both of which we'll talk about later on. Just as importantly, he never lets the lore feel like an info dump. He makes sure it's always tied directly to a character, whether they're on screen or narrating.
That is, I heard a good deal about a ring and a Dark Lord and something about the end of the world.
But a world is more than just its history and connections to our characters. It's also the physical space occupied by such things. The Fellowship of the Ring had the mountainous task of bringing these places to life. The first place we spend an extended amount of time in is the Shire. When I think of the Shire, the images that spring to mind are from the movies. I think of Frodo reading in the woods, of Gandalf trundling down the road in his cart, of the circular green door, and the no admittance except on party business sign. I picture smiling hobbits, fireworks, Bilbo's party, the cozy fireplace, the entry room and Bag End, Gandalf drinking tea, the mill, and fields of yellow. All of it feels so Shire. There's no other way to put it. And of course, it's all brought together by Howard Shore's unmatched music. More on this later. The Shire is ultimately exactly as Tolkien intended it, a safe place of simplicity that is worth fighting for and worth protecting. It reflects the semi-rural part of England in which Tolkien spent many formative years of his youth. As Frodo says in the books, I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. Though we spend significantly less time in the Shire during the movies than in the books, there's still plenty of time to really feel safe here before Gandalf begins to sense the danger of the ring, before the ringwraiths come looking for Frodo. It may seem like realizing Tolkien's vision for the Shire matters only for visuals and entertainment, but it's much more than that. Without an understanding of the Shire's beauty and its inhabitants' innocence, we wouldn't fully connect with Frodo's reluctance to carry the ring onwards from Rivendell. His desire is to return home to the land he loves. The hobbits believe their journey is over, they've done their part. His relief at finally being rid of the burden is clear in the small smile he gives after putting it on the pedestal before the council. And so, when Frodo volunteers to take the ring to Mordor, we get the regret on Gandalf's face. We know how much they're asking of Frodo. It's equal parts inspiring and tragic. These innocent creatures that Sauron and most of the world have overlooked are pulled permanently into this perilous journey, and their representative, Frodo, will return to the Shire forever changed, if he returns at all. It would take another full video to go through every region in the Fellowship of the Ring, and so I'll just say this. I'm so thankful for the use of practical effects, set designs, and costumes. One of the biggest differences in quality for me between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is the excessive use of CGI. The original trilogy obviously cannot avoid using it. After all, flaming Balrogs do not exist. However, the amount of practical work in this film is stunning. They built sets like the Prancing Pony twice, one from the Hobbit's perspectives and one for normal people. They built miniatures for Isengard that have that nitty-gritty, real feeling, and combine it with CGI to insert moving creatures that give it life. The whole design process aimed to hint at the depth of The Lord of the Rings, of Middle-earth.
I guess the way that we tried to hint at the depth, which is all that the film can really do, was partly in our design process.
They set about creating the art before the scripts were even done, treating Middle-earth as if it were real, as if the film crew were lucky enough to visit the actual places where these events took place. They recruited renowned artists like Alan Lee and John Howe, who spent decades of their lives bringing Tolkien's work to the canvas so they could help bring it to theaters and deliver an accurate and fully realized version of Middle-earth for fans all over the world. And that dedication pays off. One of the things I noticed during my rewatch was the deep emotional connections I felt to the places of Middle-earth themselves. Whether it's the calm innocence of the Shire, the almost reverent peace of Rivendell, the sinister mutilation of Isengard, the awe and loss within Moria, or the enchanting otherness of Lothlorien, every location carries with it an unmistakable and intentional ambience that grounds the viewer to this reality.
Stay close, young hobbits.
But what care have we for an empty world? No, a world needs inhabitants, and inhabitants need stories. Doing justice to characters with which readers have spent hundreds of pages and whose thoughts they've read is no small task. To do it quickly and for an ensemble cast is near impossible. And yet, the Fellowship of the Ring manages it.
9 companions.
One of the first characters we meet is Gandalf. It's a simple scene that can go unnoticed if you're not looking carefully, but I almost wrote an entire video about it. I'll shorten it to just a few observations. In just a handful of exchanges between Gandalf and Frodo, we see Gandalf's deep care for the hobbits, his relief that they're still safe and overlooked by the Dark Lord,
Which I am very thankful.
his affinity toward the Bagginses, and his love for the innocent, children especially. And it's also subtle, the precise expressions of Ian McKellen, and aside from Gandalf here, a burst of fireworks there. We get the sense that Gandalf is a weather-worn sage of the utmost importance, who still has time for the simpler people of his world, who sees not only value, but extreme importance within them. This scene is so efficient that without realizing it, we suddenly understand this old wizard, even though we've only spent a few moments with him. In the books, it's said that Gandalf's expertise in lore lies with hobbits, who are referred to as obscure. It is this care for these seemingly insignificant creatures that saves all of Middle-earth. And while we obviously don't know the significance of that at this point in the movie, we do get who Gandalf is and what his relationship with the hobbits is. It's continually reinforced in his desire to protect Frodo from the ring and the world as a whole. So his reaction when Frodo agrees to take the ring to Mordor makes perfect sense, and his eventual sacrifice in the Mines of Moria is almost inevitable. We connect in these moments to the story because we understand, because Peter Jackson knows how to translate characters from paper to screen. Think of Boromir. The first shot of him is in the Council of Elrond. Elrond is mid-sentence.
You will unite or you will fall.
The camera moves from Aragorn to Boromir, making it clear that these two in particular should heed his warning. Boromir's speech about keeping Middle-earth safe and the pure desperation in his voice make his motives clear. He wants to protect his people. With the look of concern on others' faces and his disregard of their warnings quickly show us that this man, while noble, is not to be trusted. He's one of the men Galadriel warned of who desire power above all else.
Gondor has no king.
And now we see his fatal flaw, pride. While Gandalf knows his limits and accepts he cannot withstand the ring's temptation, Boromir believes in his heart that he can use it for good. It's a lie that can only find purchase in the heart of one with a distorted self-image. All of this is from a short scene, a few lines of poignant dialogue. His slow spiral toward doom is clear from this moment forward. Though we get endearing scenes of him with Merry and Pippin, and are shown his strength in the battles of Moria, it is interleaved with moments that lay his twisted heart bare. I will say the movies do an excellent job of humanizing Boromir, something the books don't really bother to do. I'm not saying one is objectively better than the other, but I do prefer the changes made for the films. Book Boromir is more belligerent, and he lacks any real moments of endearment other than perhaps when he carves a path through the snow with the sheer strength of his body and will. I also think his reason for joining the Fellowship in the book is less compelling. He and Aragorn are essentially just traveling with them until they split off to go to Minas Tirith. In the movies, he's a full member of the Fellowship, and we get moments of tenderness before the betrayal. Then, the regret in his voice when he snaps out of his power-hungry stupor is heart-wrenching. And in the end, his death is both deserved and tragic. It feels like a greater loss because Boromir isn't just a man who's strong and insists he's right. He's part of the Fellowship, caring, and ultimately someone we could see ourselves looking up to in real life. He is the embodiment of what the ring does to someone. It exploits noble desires. The humanization of Boromir makes it hit closer to home.
Forgive me. I have failed you all.
These are just two of the many characters introduced throughout the film. Despite limited screen time, we get to know each of them so that every choice they make, good or bad, fits with what we know about them. And from their deepest desires, worst flaws, and greatest strengths come moments of triumph and failure. They are the final piece of the world that convinces us that this is real, that the stakes are legitimate, and that we should care. The mediums of film and novel are vastly different and have unique strengths for specific types of stories. In order to bring The Lord of the Rings to the big screen, Jackson had to make changes to the script. In my opinion, most of these changes are made for one purpose, to create the right pace for the movies. One of Tolkien's big goals when he set out to write The Lord of the Rings was to write something long. In his foreword, he says, "The prime motive was the desire of a tale teller to try his hand at a really long story that would hold the attention of readers, amuse them, delight them, and at times, maybe excite them or deeply move them." Moreover, in a letter to a publisher's advisor found at the beginning of the Silmarillion, Tolkien talks about how he wanted the books to be published together. He thought of the story of Middle-earth as one continuous saga. This becomes very apparent as the Fellowship of the Ring progresses. Song after song references ancient characters in Middle-earth's past. Legolas and Tom Bombadil speak of Morgoth. Númenor is referenced multiple times, and other small things. The point is that Tolkien wasn't just telling the story of The Lord of the Rings. He was telling a story within Middle-earth, and oftentimes about Middle-earth. Jackson, on the other hand, chose to focus solely on the story of the rings and cut out the things that did not progress that story.
You know, what does Old Man Willow contribute to the story of Frodo carrying the ring?
It's not that he disliked the extraneous content. There's just only so much you can fit into a movie. And so changes were made and a faster story was born. But is it really that different from the book? Yes. Yes, it is.
Much that once was is lost.
The biggest and most obvious change is the condensed timeline. In the movie, the time between Bilbo's departure and Gandalf's return to warn Frodo doesn't appear to be longer than a few months. Contrast that with the books, where Frodo doesn't learn the ring's true origin for 17 years. Then when Gandalf does finally bring the news, Frodo takes several more months to sell Bag End, say goodbye to the Shire, pretend to move to Buckland, and finally depart. You can see why that might not translate well to movies. The next big timeline change, and it's pretty massive, is the removal of the Old Forest, Tom Bombadil, and the Barrow-wights. This is many chapters in the books, and it fits well within the narrative. Tolkien gradually increases Frodo's danger over the course of the book as he gets farther from home. Tom Bombadil teaches us that while this story is about Frodo, there are many more in Middle-earth to be told. The Barrow-wights and the history and lore given during these sections really expand our understanding of Middle-earth. It works really well for the books. But remember, Jackson only wanted to tell the story of the Lord of the Rings, and so he made the tough call to pull this section out of the movies. I'll come back to what I think we lost from this section in a minute. But let's continue with the condensed timelines. Next, we have Bree and Weathertop and the flight to Rivendell. In the books, this is many weeks of traveling. Arwen never shows up, and the elf who does, Glorfindel, doesn't do so until the very end. Arwen's arrival speeds things up yet again by giving them access to a horse earlier and giving them a faster rider. I also think it probably looked good marketing-wise to have her in the trailer, but that's a discussion for another time.
If you want him, come and claim him.
The next change is in Rivendell. It's not clear from the movie how long the party is in Rivendell, but it doesn't feel nearly as long as the months spent there during the book. In general, Peter Jackson speeds up the pace by cutting out things that don't pertain to the ring or slow down the story too much for a movie. Let me emphasize this. Both the book and the movie are paced excellently, but that requires them to be different. Would I have liked to have seen the Old Forest, the Barrow-wights, and Tom Bombadil? Yes. Would it have been worth the 30 to 60 minutes of additional runtime? No, because of the climax. Here is the last big change to the timeline. The books end with Frodo and Sam setting off, leaving it rather unclear what happened to Boromir and everyone else. It's a bit of a cliffhanger, but not that much since all the books were published in 1 year and it was meant to be read as one volume. By movie standards, this isn't much of a climax, so instead, Jackson moved Boromir's sacrifice and the capture of Merry and Pippin to the first movie so that we could end with action and a proper climax. This wouldn't have worked if we had spent an extended amount of time at the front of the movie in the Old Forest. I mean, the runtime was already 3.5 hours. I think the traditional movie-going climax really helped sell tickets and got people excited for the next movie. It was ultimately the right choice, but it didn't come without a cost. And while I want to focus mostly on what makes The Fellowship of the Ring one of the best movies ever, we have to understand some of the difficulties that stood in the way of that achievement. In my opinion, it's not the pieces of the plot that are lost by expediting the first quarter of the story, or the unique character of Tom Bombadil. I think what we lose is the character development of the hobbits, some more than others. Pippin escapes the Fellowship of the Ring movie largely unscathed as a character. He's still the young, foolish hobbit in both mediums.
Throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity.
But the other hobbits have moments I wish could have been in the movies. Sam is wonderfully portrayed in the movie overall, but the moments I miss most from the books are when he makes up a song on the spot about trolls, and when it's revealed that he's been spying on Frodo for several months now to make sure his master didn't leave the Shire without the other 3 hobbits. Both of these moments added depth to a character that at first seemed like a sidekick. These traits are largely still present in the movies, but they aren't as obvious early on like in the books. One of Frodo's biggest moments of agency takes place in the Barrow Downs. He's tempted to flee and leave his friends to die, going so far as to envision Gandalf forgiving him for the betrayal to keep the ring safe. And yet, he stays and fights for his friends, and, with a lot of help from Tom Bombadil, saves them. It's essential in showing that the ring has not yet corrupted him. It's a key moment of resistance, and it's endearing for the readers.
Look after the others. Especially Sam.
Last of all is Merry, the hobbit who, debatably, suffers the most from the exclusion of this section of the book. As I mentioned before, Frodo spends several months in the books preparing to leave the Shire, all while trying to keep this secret from his close friends. As far as he knows, he's leaving his homeland and his best friends forever. Well, they catch on to him, and between Sam, Merry, and Pippin, they form a conspiracy to go with him, no matter the danger. In the chapter A Conspiracy en Masse, we get 2 of my favorite moments from the book, both from Pippin. You have obviously been planning to go and saying farewell to all your haunts all this year since April. We have constantly heard you muttering, Shall I ever look down into that valley again, I wonder, and things like that. I can just picture Merry and Sam looking at each other and rolling their eyes when Frodo, thinking he's all secretive, mutters these dramatic feelings to himself and everyone else nearby. The next line is more touching. It starts with Frodo trying to talk his friends out of coming with him. You speak of danger, but you do not understand. This is no treasure hunt, no there and back journey. I am flying from deadly peril into deadly peril. Of course we understand, said Merry firmly. That is why we have decided to come. We know the ring is no laughing matter. We are going to do our best to help you against the enemy. Then, a little later on, when Frodo exclaims that he can't trust them because of this conspiracy, we get this gem. It all depends on what you want, put in Merry. You can trust us to stick with you through thick and thin, to the bitter end. And you can trust us to keep any secret of yours closer than you keep it yourself. But you cannot trust us to let you face trouble alone and go off without a word. We are your friends, Frodo. Man, I love this line. I love the hobbits rallying around Frodo in support, far more than Merry and Pippin just stumbling into him while stealing from Farmer Maggot. Without their help, he would never have made it to Bree. It's a shame that this part was removed. And yet I know it had to be. This scene doesn't work without the long period of Frodo preparing to leave the Shire, which would have taken far too long and disrupted the flow of the story. The Barrow-wights and Frodo's bravery don't fit without the Old Forest and Tom Bombadil, and those are far less important to the story of the ring, and making a marketable movie mattered even more. I mourn the damage done to Merry's character, and really all the hobbits, but I firmly believe it was the right choice for the success of the movies as movies. Every director of an adaptation has to make difficult choices with what to cut and what to keep. What I like about Peter Jackson is that he chose to stay as faithful as he possibly could while still adjusting for his medium. When he can't fit in all the dialogue from one scene, he moves it to another.
You are Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself.
When he cuts things out, it's only to make room for that which enhances the story. When he adds things, it's purely for the viewer's understanding or entertainment. The result is a story that unfolds at just the right pace and captures the essence of the book as well as any movie could ever hope to. Something I deeply appreciate about The Fellowship of the Ring is how well it holds up as just a good movie. There's a reason it was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, and it took home 4 of them. 1 for cinematography, 1 for music, 1 for makeup, and 1 for visual effects. This is incredibly difficult to do on its own, and the fact that they managed to do this while also juggling an adaptation is truly mind-blowing. It's because of this unmatched quality that fans all over the world are able to accept some of the story changes they might have been reluctant to otherwise, like Merry's changes for me. We're glued to the screen with wide eyes at the sight of the ring wraiths, of the ring gathered up from the snow by attempted Boromir, of Saruman at the top of Orthanc. We're captured by stand-up performances by many relatively unknown actors at the time. We're awed by the visuals and engaged by the precise camera work. One of my favorite scenes is in Moria when the Fellowship first hears the drums in the deep. The constant camera movement creates a sense of panic that pairs perfectly with superb acting. We get a chance to see the horror of each character from the perspective of a cameraman that's almost in a rush to get out of Moria himself. Even the shots of Moria itself with no actual orcs feel alarming thanks to the sudden movements. When Boromir goes to shut the doors, the camera follows an arrow which whizzes right past his face. As the doors are barred, the camera falls from the ceiling to the floor to show the party, then punches in on the 2 men attempting to block the door. There's not really a single moment of stillness until right before the orcs break through. The calm before the storm. Then the orcs are through and all hell breaks loose. We move from shot to shot and see snippets of individuals fighting for their lives, engaging with the enemy as if all of Middle-earth depends on it, because it does. The battle with the cave troll manages to walk a fine line between chaotic and logical. It's a battle, and battles are unpredictable, but it's very easy to follow. Each beat is clear and enjoyable and has adequate stakes. The members of the Fellowship take turns either trying to kill this thing or getting nearly demolished. The balance between cutting quickly to keep things moving and following the characters with the camera helps tell the story. The camera work beforehand builds up the suspense of the scene. The camera work during it makes it easy to follow and feels very real. We really feel as if the Fellowship has nearly met their match. It takes everyone involved to finally fell this thing, and the payoff is well deserved. There are countless other beautifully shot scenes that I could watch and talk about for hours, but I want to move on to the music. It's impossible to talk about the Lord of the Rings trilogy without praising the work of Howard Shore. He composed one of the best film scores of all time. The emotional connection to each location I mentioned before is due to the music associated with each of those places as much as anything else. The fiddle and dulcimer and Celtic harp give the Shire a fitting folkish feel. Rivendell's lofty and calming aura is assisted by a beautiful choir. low strings, and harps. The drums in Moria lend a sense of urgency and doom. The haunting voices in Lothlorien pair perfectly with the somber atmosphere. I listen to this music all the time during work and when I'm writing scripts for videos. It always stirs something within me that I can't fully explain. A longing to be somewhere I've never been, to see sights that don't exist. Except that they do, in a way. They exist in our imagination, partially due to Howard Shore's work. I'm no expert on music, but if you want to know more about this aspect of the movies, I'll link a few videos by listening in that dive deeper. I'm going to use one of his quotes that I think perfectly praises the music in the films. What Howard Shore has left behind is a musical legacy of unparalleled depth and beauty. Scores full of melodies and themes that exist to both perfectly serve the story, but that also have a wide-reaching, universal effect on us as emotional beings. Shifting from audio to visual, Weta Workshop, the studio responsible for the VFX, absolutely outdid themselves. From the flaming Balrog to the Shadow Realm, every single one of the 480 VFX shots looks stunning. Except maybe Evil Galadriel. All shall love me and despair. But that could just be me. What's crazy to me is that this movie was made in 2001, over 20 years ago, and yet there are high-budget movies that came out this year that don't even look this good. Weta worked tirelessly to make this happen, by using the tools that already existed in creative new ways, and by inventing new tools like Massive to bring full-scale battles to the screen. Going back to the troll scene, they used mocap to let Peter Jackson use a physical camera to film the digital troll to make it feel as realistic as possible. I think the best word for this team and project is innovative. Seriously, no movie looked like this before The Fellowship of the Ring, and very few look like it even now. I would highly suggest watching VFX artists react to The Lord of the Rings by Corridor Crew to see more in depth how skillful the studio's artists were in their craft.
It's just brute force hard work to get this shot to work.
It was a bit bizarre watching the special features and realizing that the people who worked on this movie weren't certain it would be a success. It's hard to even imagine a time when there was a doubt about it. Surely they must have had an idea of how beloved their work would be. Surely they knew that because of their work, millions of fans would get to see one of the most, if not the most loved fantasy world become real. Before we continue to the last section of the video, I want to thank you for watching this far. I make videos about movies, books, games, and TV shows, and if you'd like to see more of that kind of content, maybe a video on the Two Towers, feel free to subscribe. I'm a pretty small channel, so I greatly appreciate your time and support. Okay, back to the video. Excellent art has the unique ability to reach beyond entertainment and touch the human heart. The danger lies in forcing this, and art that does so lacks subtlety. Movies and books are especially in danger of overstepping, or becoming preachy. The moment a piece of entertainment becomes less interesting or realistic because of a shoehorned message is generally the moment I abandon it. Tolkien himself had similar feelings. He said, "I cordially dislike allegory in all of its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers." I think many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader, and the other in the purposed domination of the author. And so Middle-earth is pleasantly void of the overemphasized messages that have become increasingly common in modern media. Or maybe I'm just growing more cynical, I don't know.
That age, it seems, has finally caught up with me.
However, to say that Tolkien's works lack themes or values is utterly ridiculous. Tolkien talks often and openly about them, and I would say that the themes are what elevates his stories beyond many others in the fantasy genre. They are what stir our emotions and help us to better understand our own world and ourselves. And they are probably some of the hardest things to translate from the page to the big screen, especially since the themes from The Lord of the Rings aren't exactly typical for fantasy.
It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand.
It's not uncommon to see themes of justice and revenge or commentaries on war within fantasy, but the Fellowship isn't focused on that. Instead, we see compassion and mercy. As I've mentioned before, Gandalf, one of the most powerful beings in Middle-earth, has a deep compassion for the little people of the Shire, and it's because of his love for them that he strives to protect them. He's constantly in this tension of both wanting to take care of the ones most dear to him and allowing them to fulfill their destinies. Bilbo too is full of compassion for his adopted heir Frodo when he learns of his duty to take the ring to Mordor.
I'm sorry that you must carry this burden.
And most surprising, Bilbo is merciful towards Gollum, a creature wholly undeserving of such treatment. Showing mercy and compassion towards a wretched creature is what ends up saving all of Middle-earth in the end. Not vengeance, not an epic feat of strength, not unmatched magical power, but mercy.
Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment.
My personal favorite is the theme of responsibility. As life goes on, responsibilities tend to grow. Many of them, like providing for our family or taking care of a dog, are the results of our own choices. But others, like becoming the caretaker of a sick spouse, or the guardian of a grandchild or niece or nephew, or the medical treatment decision maker for an elderly parent, these duties are thrust upon us. For Frodo, being the ring bearer is not a choice. Not really. He volunteers to get the ring to Rivendell, thinking that there are more qualified people that will take over from there.
I am ready to go home.
Once it's abundantly clear that that's not going to happen, he volunteers again. But really, what other option does he have? Let the world fall into ruin and shadow? There are no good choices, and Frodo regrets this bitterly.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
Boy, isn't that relatable. His authenticity is refreshing, and ultimately, while he feels he has no option but to see this through to the end, he does see it through with every ounce of his strength. And at every opportunity to turn back, he takes a step forward. Sometimes reluctantly, sometimes with quaking knees. But Frodo doesn't give up. He makes difficult decisions and sacrifices nearly everything, and in the end, he succeeds. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The main thing that runs through my head when I see him volunteer and when I see him struggle is that he still did it. He wasn't perfect, and he sought help, but he had the best attitude he knew how to have, and he did what he needed to do. And he shouldered his burden with humility, another less than common theme for fantasy, a genre that tends towards characters with untapped magic potential, striking looks, or unsurpassable wit. Frodo knows he's not up to the task. He's just a little hobbit, out of place in the Council of Elrond where lofty men and elves of royalty convene, where powerful beings give advice. It's not pride that drives him to this decision, but inevitability.
I will take the ring to Mordor. I do not know the way.
Gandalf too expresses humility when he acknowledges his own limits and refuses the ring. And then again when Caradhras is blocked and he defers to the ring bearer for the decision.
So be it.
Aragorn, the rightful king of Gondor, has lived humbly for dozens of years as a ranger, despised by those he keeps safe. Sam is the very picture of a humble servant who rises to every occasion despite his own doubts. Pride, on the other hand, is shown for what it is, destructive. There are many other themes like the dangers of temptation, the power of hope, the strength of friendship, and more. The moments when these themes come to the surface make for bridges into our own lives. Suddenly, it's not just Frodo wishing the ring had never come to him, but you or me feeling the weight of constant health problems, praying we'll be rid of them someday. It's not just Gandalf longing to care for the hobbits, but a parent wanting to protect their children from danger. It's not Sam refusing to let Frodo leave him behind. It's a friend reaching out to someone close to him with depression, and being there in every way he knows how. It's not Frodo volunteering to take the ring to Mordor, but one of us driving hours to take care of a loved one for the week. We see reflections of our own lives in the Fellowship of the Ring, and its characters give us courage and motivation to keep going. It's a story full of truth, infused with hope, and deeply rooted in the values of its author. These truths make it far more than just a story. And that, perhaps, is the best way to summarize why we love this movie so much. It's more than just a story. Yes, the massive battles, captivating fights, thrilling chases, and breathtaking sights are what draw us in, but that's not enough to keep us coming back over and over again. It's the heroic deeds of ordinary creatures, the selfless acts of true leaders, the unwavering commitment of friends standing by those they love, in a world where good is cherished and evil is thwarted. That is what keeps us coming back. Ultimately, we return because Peter Jackson managed to capture the qualities of this story that make it timeless in a film that uses its medium to the greatest capacity perhaps ever seen. The Fellowship of the Ring entertains and delights us, but more importantly, it moves us. It reaches into the places of our being that mere entertainment could never hope to touch. I hope you enjoyed this little tribute to the Fellowship of the Ring. As I said before, my channel is just starting to grow. If you're interested, I started a Patreon with a single tier that gets you into the credits for the next video and provides early access to future content. And since I just added it, I'm super open to hear what kind of benefits you would want to see on a Patreon. Since recording this, I decided that the first video on Patreon would be about the creative process for this massive video and some behind the scenes. It's already been uploaded, so you can go watch it right now. This is where I'll be showing a list of patrons in future videos. Since I don't have any yet, I'll give a shout out to my friends AJ Whiting and Cole Troutman for being my Tolkien lore consultants and for giving feedback on the script. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.